If you're a saved person, a follower of Jesus Christ, then don't be worldly. The things of the world and the priorities of the world for a saved person can distract us from the things that are most important, serving and obeying God. We can get caught up in our jobs, working long hours and neglecting to make time to read the Bible every day. We can get caught up in the material things of the world and neglect to be cheerful givers to God's church and to the furtherance of His gospel. We can get caught up in our own entertainment and recreation and neglect to attend church or to spend time serving God's people. For unsaved people, the things of the world are there to keep them in bondage to sin. Temptation to sin is everywhere. It's on television, it's at the workplace, it's on the internet, it's in conversations with others, it's everywhere people look. Our culture is constantly telling people that it's okay to do things that God hates. The priorities of the world are pleasure, materialism, lust, greed, pride, anger, envy, intoxication, and the like. Everywhere you look, these things are celebrated. Advertisements use lust to sell their products. People gamble with God's money at casinos and on lotteries, all to have more money to buy more stuff. Reality TV celebrates conflict and anger. The prideful actions of professional athletes are cheered and imitated. The world tells us to buy products that'll give us an idyllic lifestyle, a lifestyle we're told we deserve. And you can hardly go to or watch on TV a sporting event without being bombarded with people consuming alcohol. We're supposed to believe that if we're not in a near constant state of carousing, that we're somehow missing out on life. The world paints a picture of a decadent, self-absorbed, self-indulgent lifestyle that sadly is assumed to be the yardstick by which a person's life is measured. This is especially true for young people. Wild, irresponsible, self-destructive behavior is considered a rite of passage. Sadly, many of these young lives are cut short by this reckless behavior, as survivors dare to question God's fairness for allowing the consequences of sin to overtake someone in the prime of their life. Oh, the twisted priorities of the world. The world tells us that evil is good and that good is evil. A life filled with sin and debauchery is normal and expected, and a life of obedience to God is a life wasted. Isn't this exactly the way the devil wants people to think, as they live this short life with no regard for the eternity of the next? As God tells us through James in James chapter 4, verse 14, "Yet you don't know what your life will be like tomorrow. You are just a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away." But the philosophy of the world is, live for today. If it feels good, do it. Eat, drink, and be merry. The devil makes sure that the world distracts us from any thoughts of the next life. Because if people thought about the next life and the eternal consequences of their actions in this life, they may not be as eager to continue to store up wrath for themselves. But of course, the distractions and enticements of the world are meant to keep any thoughts of such things far from the mind of the rebellious sinner. The desire in the heart of the unsaved person is to indulge in as many of these worldly pleasures as they can squeeze into one lifetime. In fact, the mere notion of not having these priorities are incomprehensible to the rebellious heart. But as saved people, as people filled with God's Holy Spirit, our priorities are different. Our desires are not for the things that would separate us from God, but are for the things that are pleasing to God. We are foreigners in a strange land. Our home is in heaven, and the priorities of heaven, not the priorities of the world, are foremost in our minds. God will strengthen us to ignore the priorities of the world. Through prayer and the reminder of God's priorities found in His Word, God gives us the strength to not fall for the temptations and indulgences of the world. Though our flesh is weak, God gives us the strength and desire to be obedient to Him and not be enticed by the world. Those still trapped in willful sin cannot escape the temptations of the world. Not only do they lack the desire to be freed from these enticements, but they so desperately want to be accepted by the world that the separation from the world that God demands is untenable to them. They are not bothered by sin or by sinful people. Quite the contrary. They seek the approval of sinful people as ones who won't judge them for their rebellious ways. But God tells the saved person in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 14 to 18, to separate themselves from willful sinners, to touch no unclean thing. The saved person does not touch with their hands, their eyes, their ears, their mind, the unclean things that the world offers every day. We are not of this world. Our inheritance is in heaven. The world thinks we're strange for not wanting to run with them into the same excess of riot. Yet as saved people with new desires, we do not crave the same corrupt things that the unsaved crave, because we are sons and daughters of the living God. He is our Father and provides the things that truly satisfy. The things that we take pleasure in last for all eternity. God tells us of the passing pleasures of this world compared to the eternal graces of obedience in 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 to 17, when he says through John, "Do not love the world, nor the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, and the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world. And the world is passing away, and also its lusts. But the one who does the will of God abides forever." Our life with God in heaven abides forever. This is the promise of salvation and the desire of the heart of the believer. The pleasures of the world are transient at best, but the grace and love of God are eternal. Will the pleasures of sin be any comfort to those poor souls destined for an eternity of punishment in hell? Will any of them consider their torment worth the pleasure of sin for a season? The lusts of the world pass away because they are not from the Father. Many who consider themselves saved are, in fact, still slaves to sin because the love of the world is still in them. They do not have the love of the Father, and therefore do not have the desire-changing regeneration that His Spirit provides through true salvation. Oh, how wretched the plight of those who think they love God, but as evidenced by their desires, love the world more. Not only have they forsaken the love of the Father for the love of the world, but in doing so have made themselves enemies of God. For this is the plight of those who would rebel against God because of their love for worldly things. As God tells us through James in James chapter 4, verse 4, "You adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world is hostility toward God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. An enemy of God and a friend to the world. For friends are those who have common desires and enjoyments. If you enjoy the things of the world and find the things of God burdensome and tedious, then beg God for mercy. Beg God for true salvation and faith that not only saves but changes. Don't be deceived by the lies of the world, the lies that tell you your life will not be worth living without the things of this world. These are the lies meant to enslave you to sin, so that you're not only a captive of sin, but a willing and satisfied captive of sin. Oh, what slavery is this! Beg God for your freedom. Beg God for salvation. Beg God to clear the scales from your eyes so that you can see the snare that is this sinful and corrupt world. And if you're already saved, thank God every day for freeing you from the corruption of this world. Thank Him for your treasures in heaven. Thank Him for the desire to obey Him. Be constantly mindful that no matter what happens to us in this world, this life is just a vapor, a blink of the eye compared to the eternity that Jesus has secured for us in heaven with Him forever. What can the world offer us in exchange for that?